Hello everyone, and welcome to the very last episode of Alpenglow. Now, I always intended this to be a relatively short series. I just wanted to see what I could do in a short amount of build time, at least, in terms of being able to make a big city. I do see the irony in the fact that it has been several years that it's taken me to actually finish the series in terms of uploading these videos and getting all these videos out. But I think the end result, at least for me, was worth it. I hope that you will be able to say the same once you've seen the city in its finished form and all the various videos and other things that I'll be doing to showcase the city. But I will be getting more into that closer to the end of the episode as I see the series out. So first, I'm starting by extending this light rail line and actually putting some stations in, because before there weren't actually stations here. So I wanted it to feel a little bit more like light rail and a little bit less like a tram system. So I just used these very simple light rail station assets, and I'm just reconfiguring the stops to fit those. So this whole episode is going to be finishing off this eastern portion of the city. So this rail line runs all the way across town from Cardston, which is kind of to the southwest of downtown Alpenglow, all the way over here to the Chanson area that we made last episode. So this is really the main transit line for the entire city that runs along the whole length of the valley and carries people wherever they need to go, pretty much. So while I have you here, before you've closed out of the video, I really appreciate your patience here. I'd like to ask, what would you like to see next? Because this is the last episode of Alpenglow, so eventually I'm going to need to start another series of some sort. Yeah, I'm going to be focusing on Todos Santos for a while because I'd like to make progress there. I mean, I have plenty of ideas of things I'd like to do in the game, but, you never know what good ideas are lurking out there in someone's head. So, yeah, I'd like to invite you to share those with me if there's something that I could do well that hasn't been done yet, or something that you think would be a good challenge that you'd like to see me struggle with. Whatever is bouncing around your head, I'd like to hear it. And of course, I'm not going to promise anything yet because I've learned the hard way that, you can't play the same game over and over again for years at a time with no break. So I'll probably have to take another break at some point, just being honest there. I'd like to have the option of starting a new project at some point because I think there are lots of things, especially on the detailed side of things, that I just haven't done in the game yet, and mods I haven't quite checked out because I'm being a little conservative with updating Todos Santos's mod list. I'm kind of leaning in the direction of like a very small build that's very highly detailed, because that's something I kind of miss in Todos Santos, where I still go into quite a bit of detail, but I don't quite have the freedom to really hone in on the very small details because, I have to be able to make a big city as well. But then again, there might be some other idea that's completely different from that sounds more interesting, more creatively inspiring. Who knows? Okay, back to the build. Basically, I'm just expanding the Chanson area that I made last episode, and I'm also adding on these very kind of loose, weird, almost suburban-looking roads north of Chanson and east of Chanson. And this is basically like the fringe of the suburbs of the city, where we have very weird local roads that stick pretty strictly to the road hierarchy, so it's basically just the main roads that surround it, and then you just can kind of have whatever weird, twisty road networks you want to try to discourage people from using them as through roads. But because we're not quite in the very low-density suburbs, I'm still zoning these areas quite closely here. And I'd kind of like the actual suburbs themselves almost to just be in your imagination. Although I have created a little bit of a suburban zone off-camera, which if you watch the tour video, which will be coming out next week, I think, you'll be able to see what I mean with that. It's not anything you missed with me doing it off camera. It's just almost sort of a joke, but you'll be able to see that in the tour video, like I said. But basically what that does is it serves to artificially increase the population of Alpenglow and to generate more traffic to and from the city instead of just having dummy traffic going across the highways, which the vanilla game does have. It just sends dummy citizens on a drive through the highway that don't actually stop in the city. But I just figured that by plopping some buildings down at the edge of the map, that I would be able to make the traffic seem a little bit more realistic in that people would be going actually to and from the city instead of just crossing through the highway. And I made a little bit of a very, very simple park called Watson Park here, which is also the name of this little neighborhood I'm putting together here. And it's basically the same thing we did for Arkland Park back in the day when I made that. I don't remember quite which episode that was, but just a very simple path that goes through this area. And I've kind of developed Alpenglow to be, part of its identity is that it has lots of parks, so that would be the way they try to attract people to come here. It would be worth the freezing cold winters in order to have access to all the parks, both in the city and then, of course, the amazing mountains. That would be lots of fun. Winter, summer, spring, fall, pretty much all the time. You're going to be able to find something interesting to do outside, as long as you have a warm enough coat. So as far as the road layout is concerned, I'm not exactly sure how this is set up in real life, but I'm imagining that, like, instead of just extending the current road network for development, they would, sell or lease out subdivisions in some way, and then those roads would be developed privately or just kind of in a self-contained manner instead of integrating them into the road network like you get in downtown and near downtown. And so that's why these roads turn into these kind of strange, wavy-looking things with all these weird intersections. And that's just because they've all been developed separately with different intentions in terms of the way they're going to be developed. With the only really unifying theme being that they're a little strange and that they, like I mentioned before, stick very strictly to the road hierarchy. So they're generally not going to be used by anybody as through roads. But I do think when you pull back and look at them, once all the buildings have grown and the trees have been placed down, that it just adds a little bit of character to the road network as a whole. And it, again, once it's all come together with all the parts and the trees and everything, I just really think it helps it to blend in and make it look more like a cohesive area, even though the intention is really, of the people who developed it, I guess, would be to make it not integrated and not cohesive. But nonetheless, it still ends up looking like that. And this neighborhood is sort of the ultimate expression of that. It's like this very, very large area next to the freeway that is, I guess, just its own subdivision. And I imagine that all of these buildings would be cookie cutter duplexes that are just packed tightly together and plopped down here. It's like the real life equivalent of copying and pasting houses with Move It. They would be doing that in real life and, trying to fit as many people as they could in here without building high rises, because that would be unacceptable. So I'm really just trying to fill this whole area with that sort of development. I kind of miss being able to make a really nicely integrated road network like I have in downtown, where you still get to have some weird road designs, like fused grids and that kind of thing, but it still, feels like it's part of the same road network and it's not just its own distinct thing. Anyway, I'm going to let the zoning speak for itself for a moment, and I'll meet you back here in just a second. Favorite part of this series, covering everything with trees, because I want to have the city to have a nice tree cover, because I think that looks really cool just on its own with the trees, but then when you mix it in with the snow cover and the mixture of partially covered trees and fully snowed in trees, I just really like that look. And I think it really gives the feeling of a very cold winter city. And if you don't live somewhere that gets snow cover, or you've never traveled somewhere that has snow cover, I know it might sound a little strange, but I highly recommend finding a nice city to go to during the winter and taking a little trip there, because there's nothing quite like seeing a city full of trees that are all covered in snow, especially if you get like freezing temperatures after a night of mist or something like that, and the trees are just completely covered in frost. And that's a look you can't really get anywhere else. And I think things like that are the reason why this is my favorite DLC, which I know is Not exactly the most popular opinion that this is the best DLC. And I know some people think that it can look a little bleak when everything's covered in snow, but I don't know. There's something about the simplicity of it that I really enjoy. And plus the gameplay mechanics are quite fun too, in terms of the way it affects traffic and needing to keep the roads clear from snow. It's not very challenging, but it's very fun, in my opinion. And I highly recommend, if you do not have this DLC, that this should be high up on your list. Assuming you like the aesthetic of it, of course. If you don't, then you're not going to have any fun with it. You'll probably want to get it for the trams anyway. I'm not a big fan of the technique of sneaking in things like trams into a otherwise unrelated DLC. But at this point, there's nothing we can do about that. Maybe I'm being too cynical with my interpretation of what they did there, but let me know what you think. Do you like this DLC? Do you like Snowfall maps? I mean, if you're watching this, you probably at least have some interest in it. Otherwise, you wouldn't really be interested in this series. So anyway, my technique for these trees was just to start off with a very thick layer of trees where I cover the entire area, and then I just go in, make sure that there aren't trees sticking out of buildings, and I finish it off with some move it work and just copy and paste. And then I clear out this park a little bit just to make it look a little bit more accessible in terms of having trails and stuff. Okay, as I fill in this very, very last section of the city, I'll let you know what's to come for Alpenglow, because while this is the last episode of the build, it is not at all the last video that I'm going to be creating for Alpenglow. So there will be more if you'd like to see it in more detail. First, I'll start with the non-video things. So I created a transit map of Alpenglow that covers every single transit line in the city and kind of gives a little bit of lore and a little bit of background to the transit lines, but also just the city as a whole and its history. I'll be linking that in the description. I'm not sure how I'm going to host that yet, but there will be a link of some sort down there. And then I have also uploaded the save game to the Steam Workshop, so you can download it and download the associated mod list and hopefully get that to work. I've done my best to update the mod list for 2022, and it runs just fine on my system. So hopefully that means that all of you will be able to do that if you are interested in such a thing. You'll probably need a decent graphics card to be able to run it, unless you want to lower all the settings, which, would be a perfectly fine option. Okay, and now on to the videos I have created to showcase this city. So first, we have a before and after video that takes you from the very first episode with not a single road, not a single building, and shows you the growth of Alpenglow from beginning to end, all the way up to the builds we're doing this episode. That one's nice and short and to the point. Following that, there will be a cinematic video that takes you on a sort of cinematic tour of the city, showing off various points of interest and some of the nicer looking areas of the city. And then I have also gone and done a sort of tour of the city, just a kind of a casual tour where I zoom around. It's not a time lapse or anything, it's all live, where I zoom around and talk about the build process and some of the areas of the city, some of the history and the lore and the points of interest. It's over an hour long, so if you really want more Alpenglow, that's probably the way to go. I didn't go in intending to make an hour-long video, but it just kind of turned into that. But I think it's a lot of fun, and I hope you'll find it fun as well. And then, finally, I recorded some transit videos where I show off from ground level what it's like to drive through the city on the various freeways, and also videos of what it's like to ride the trains of Alpenglow. Now, for these transit videos, I'm still working on them. They're not finished, and I'm not quite happy with where they're at now, so I don't really have a time frame for those. But as for the other ones, they should be uploaded quite soon. I believe I'll be uploading the tour next week, and the other two will be coming within the next few days. So I hope you're looking forward to those. And now the episode's almost over. I think it's probably fitting, based on how I built the city, that we finish it off with a round of trees, just to really seal in that look of being a city in the middle of winter, in the middle of a forest, in a valley. Thank you so much for joining me for this series and this episode. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. I know I have. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.